I was going back and forth if I wanted to record this episode of Raw, but clearly I decided to do so. And even though the show is halfway done, it's more the indication of what's coming out after the show. And I will explain that once we get through booking and we can move forward with the plan. Um, so let's just get to the booking aspect of it and move on from there. Because at this past week's episode of Heat, after losing again in a tag team match, Conway finally decide. I mean, Dupree finally decides it's time to stand alone because, as you can see, he wins normally individually, but in a tag team, it's very sparse or scarce when wins come his way, or it's been sparse or scarce for wins to come his way. So he's ready to stand on his own, in his opinion. And then we got the main event tonight: Intercontinental Champion Rob Van Dam against Chris Jericho. Playing off the angle from the start of Raw last week. Or was it? It wasn't last week, was it? Um, I'm very confused. I thought it was last week. Was it this week? I am very confused, to be honest with you. It wasn't this week. Point is, there was a show recently. There was a show recently where I believe it was, or maybe I didn't actually book it and I was just thinking I did. And I was just thinking I did. Where a number of top contenders were a number of top contenders um, were in the ring, and that set up matches, sort of the likes of which we saw last week with. Okay, so actually, I must have changed the segment because there is nothing there that shows that. So I don't know what I'm talking about, to be honest with you. Clearly, clearly, I don't know what I'm talking about. Also, recently, Al Snow's been doing a bit of a six-man tag run, or going on a bit of a six-man tag run. He had one at the beginning of the month, one last week, teaming with Thuggin' and Buggin'. And this week, I'm going to change the match. I was going to put him against the Dudley Boys, but I feel like I could better use the time. I got a better use of my time. I have grown to bring in the legends this year a lot. I've brought in the legends a lot this year, actually. And that really hasn't changed things because of the amount of time that I've spent with the legends this year. Um, I guess. I mean, Al Snow doesn't need to win every six-man tag team match he's in. Mondo, where he keeps finding these pictures. The Dudley Boys will be defending the tag team titles once again against the Hurricane and Rosie. And let's see if we can actually do this. Joe Gertner's back. Joe Gertner's back, and we will make the match end in a disqualification to set up because the pay per view is in 14 days. The pay per view is in about 14 days. So the tag team titles could use a match at the pay per view. So, yeah. We could use a match for the tag team division at the pay per view. And with that being said, it's fitting to have the Dudleys. It's fitting to have the Dudleys against someone at the pay per view so the Dudleys actually can compete and defend the titles. And where they're not just defeating another team in a clean finish. Right now, Batista is the one member of Evolution that does not have anything going on. Triple H is building to his match with Jeff Hardy. Ric Flair is building to his match with Shawn Michaels. Randy Orton is building to a match with Chris Jericho. Batista is the only one that doesn't have anything going on. But I'm sure I could change that like that. Get get Dave a chance against RVD, right? I'm ascending with everything he has. I also Dusty See, if we jump back in time, if we jump back in time to Raw 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, it was back in Los Angeles, Long Beach, California, where Dusty Rhodes made his return to the WWE, and his return at the Bischoff welcomed him back, and at the behest of Eric Bischoff, Dusty was given the stage to be the returning legend, but Randy Orton interrupted, making his presence known, and that forced Bischoff. It demanded Bischoff ended up demanding an apology from Randy Orton the following week on Raw for disrespecting Dusty Rhodes, and now Randy is calling Dusty Rhodes back to WWE to give him the apology face to face. You know, you could ask the question of, will that actually happen? Well, what do you think? Do you think it's going to actually happen? I'm loving booking Randy Orton, by the way. Like, legit, I am loving booking Randy Orton right now, to be honest with you. Now let's just do a normal one. Problem. Crap. Recently, Kenny King has been run down. Kenny King has been uh, spoken down to. Kenny King has been basically told by Lawler, for lack of a degree. Well, a couple weeks ago on a panel, I held a panel on uh, Heat and Velocity where Legends sat with Gene Okerlund and talked about the the future of WWE and talent that they saw as the future. John Cena was spoken about, Randy Orton, and also there was a time where the Legends can could there was also a time where the Legends could put out who they thought would be a top star in the future, and or that they wanted to see a bit more of before they would consider them a top star. And Jerry Lawler pointed to Mr. Kenny King, which Kenny King took exception to after he heard that, because from Lawler, and then that started the feud between Kenny King and Jerry Lawler. You know, that started the feud between Kenny King and Jerry Lawler. After that, and now Kenny King is trying to get physical with Lawler. I don't think it would be a tainted finish. Let's just keep it the way it is. letting them know that both will be in action on Raw next week ahead of the pay per view. Excuse me. Okay, so we just got to put the specifics on some of these matches and wait, steal the. What is this then? Oh, Wild Brawl. Okay, I didn't even know. To be honest with you, I didn't even know. But let me grab somebody from from OVW, or maybe I'll grab two people from OVW and let them work a jobber match. I mean, not a jobber match. Sorry, a tryout match. That's the word. Tryout match on the pre-show. As I've been working Johnny Jeter a few times, but now Mark Magnus is actually a heel down in developmental, and this is actually the first time that Chase Stevens is not featured on an episode of Raw since Chase made his debut a few weeks ago. Because if I've learned anything, it's part of slow building a feud is slowly bringing it along and not rushing into a feud. You know what I mean? Because there's rushing into things and there's unnecessarily rushing into things, and unnecessarily rushing into things really doesn't warrant. Like Chase Stevens has, honestly, Chase Stevens has impressed me working with Evolution and working with Shawn Michaels. So there really is no reason, in my opinion, to speed up the process and shy away from it. Of course, I got a scratch in the palm of my hand, so it kind of is excessively annoying. But with how impressive Chase Stevens has been, it kind of warrants, it kind of warrants bringing him along slow and seeing if I can get him somewhere to where he can have somewhat of a rivalry with Evolution and continue the rivalry with Evolution to where he's not, like just cannon fodder, I guess is the best way to put it. You know what I mean? But here's what I mentioned as to the reason why I decided to record this episode, and that is because between Raw and SmackDown, or between episodes of Raw, between television, between episodes of TV, both Mae Young and Killer Kowalski passed away. So I decided to do some form of a tribute to both May and Killer Kowalski during this episode of Raw, with Shane, Eric Bischoff, and Stephanie McMahon acknowledging the passing of two legends from WWE's past, and also announcing that on next week's episode of Raw there will be a battle royal titled the Mae Young Classic as a way to tribute the passing of Mae Young, or tribute and honor the legacy of Mae in professional wrestling. And that is also why tonight's episode of Raw was a big episode, including Stephanie, Shane, Eric Bischoff, Steve Austin, Vince McMahon, and a lot of championship matches as a way to honor two legends from WWE's past. Garrison Cade gets a solid victory against Stevie Richards in one of Stevie's rare appearances on Raw, to be honest with you. But Vince is here, like I mentioned. Last night on Heat, Scott Steiner actually lost in a match against a local talent, Thunder, because I made the mistake of not picking Steiner to win, not thinking that they would actually have the local talent win. But this is why I was always told pick the winner, don't assume, because of something like this. But the fact of the matter is, I decided to make it into a story or an angle where this is going to lead to a wedge being driven between Steiner and Test and the end of the dissolution of the tag team, which may be a problem considering the fact that on Heat, I did decide to dissolve La Resistance. So right now, Raw's tag team division is getting to the point where it needs a rebuild. But Shawn Michaels is in a early spot on the card, the earliest match that I've ever put Shawn Michaels in since I started this season, against Mark Henry, right in the middle of the card, and Shawn still does a very solid performance. This is where things start taking a little interesting turn. As Shawn mentions the fact that he never thought he would have the opportunity, or at some point, there were points where he thought he would never have the opportunity to get in the ring with his idol, Ric Flair. And he mentions his match against Randy Orton that Chris Jericho got involved in, which allowed him to get the victory. And he mentions to Jericho directly that he didn't need the help, and next time it would be best if Jericho stayed out of the way. This brings Jericho out, saying that he didn't do it to help Shawn Michaels, he did it to get under Randy Orton's skin, and apparently it worked. But if Michaels doesn't want help, the next time, maybe Michaels won't be the one he helps. And we move from one hot segment to another as Steve Austin interrupts Vince McMahon. Vince has been looking for that looking for a thank you from The Rock for basically creating the success that The Rock has had outside of WWE and taking the credit for the success that The Rock has had outside of WWE. And Steve Austin says that Vince McMahon better watch his mouth. Otherwise, he won't just get a stunner, but he will live to regret running his mouth a little too much. The end of La Resistance does open the door for the ability to a little bit more mobility to push people like Rob Conway and Rene Dupree, which this is the second win for Rene Dupree since the loss, or since the dissolution of La Resistance. So you got to figure maybe it's a sign of things to come for the French Phenom. Six-man tag team action: Brad Armstrong, Val Venus, and Lance Storm against Warlord, Buddy Landell, and Al Snow. Six-man tag team action just to get the mid card on the card, and it's just been the role that I've had Al Snow in for the last couple of weeks. Mike Mondo, again, I do apologize. I am a little bit under the weather. You can hear the congestion in my voice. So if you hear it a little bit during the video, I do apologize. But Mondo has been teaming with Matt Hardy. And last week he found a photo. Honestly, I don't know why I didn't script him, but that's beside the point. He found a photo, and again, he finds another photo, shows it to Matt Hardy, but the photo is facing away from the camera. So we don't see the photo that Mondo is showing Matt Hardy, but Matt Hardy is wondering where Mike Mondo keeps finding these photos. But it's one of those segments that it's a little random, or it seems a little random, but when we get the payoff, you'll understand why these segments were happening. The tag team titles are on the line, with the Bubba Ray and Devon defending the titles against the Hurricane and Rosie. Bubba Ray gets disqualified after a botched interference. I don't know why it says Bubba Dudley gets disqualified, where they basically took away the segment of Joe Gertner getting involved. And I also wanted to include Joe Gertner in a segment, but I decided to do something else and go a different way and maybe, milk the segment for next week or save the segment for next week. But at least now I got something to put together on Heat. I'm not saying I'm going to put together the segment on Heat, but we'll get some answers, or maybe we'll get some answers on Heat. But either way, we move forward with Evolution. As, like I said, Batista is the only one in Evolution that has nothing going on right now. Triple H has Jeff Hardy, Ric Flair has Shawn Michaels, and Randy Orton is keeping himself busy. Because, like I said, I am enjoying booking Randy Orton right now and developing his feud with Chris Jericho and setting up a possible feud with the American Dream. As Randy asks Dusty to join him on Raw next week to apologize to Dusty Rhodes personally, face to face in the middle of the ring like a man. Billy Gunn against Rob Conway. I'm a little impressed that Rob Conway did better in the ring than Billy Gunn, but Rene Dupree is got his momentum going one way. Sylvan and Rob Conway got their momentum going the other way. There's a reason why Rene Dupree was the one that broke up La Resistance and not Rob or Sylvan. Jeff Bischoff sets up or announces that both Jeff Hardy and Triple H will be in action next week ahead of their title match at Bad Blood in 13 days on pay-per-view. This is Jeff Hardy's first title opportunity since returning to WWE about a month and a half ago, so he was immediately brought back and thrust into the world title picture after winning a fatal four-way, including, including I believe it was Rene Dupree, Maven, and Chuck Palumbo, four guys who never challenged Triple H before to get a new, fresh challenger in the ring against Hunter. And that was the extent of the match, or the point of the four-way, to find a number one contender to fight Hunter, who he's never fought before. But now we move to the attack as Kenny King jumps Jerry Lawler. Just picture this: Jerry and Jim Ross are on commentary, and Kenny King jumps Jerry Lawler at the announce booth, and you just hear Jim Ross screaming and putting over how brutal and how unnecessary and how disrespectful and how reprehensible the attack is from Kenny King attacking Lawler. But this is Jerry Lawler being written off for a couple weeks to set up his inevitable match with Kenny King, likely in July at Vengeance. But now we got a solid main event and something that opens the door for the future, maybe between Chris Jericho and Rob Van Dam, but a very solid main event, netting us a 90 with Jericho and Rob Van Dam, but also, as I mentioned earlier, Jericho got involved and cost Randy Orton his match against Shawn Michaels. So Randy Orton got involved and cost Jericho his match against Rob Van Dam. And that leads to Jericho chasing after Randy Orton, and the show ending with Randy Orton speeding off into the night, and Jericho trying to follow, but knowing he will be in the arena with Randy next week on Raw. But either way, a very, very solid episode of Raw as we move another step closer to Bad Blood. But I just wanted to mention that the reason why I recorded this is because this was sort of a bigger episode, and I booked it as a bigger episode as a way to tribute Mae Young and Killer Kowalski, who passed away in between episodes of Raw. So instead of running the vignette or the video package that WWE is known for, I set up the Mae Young Classic next week with all the women of WWE being featured in the match, and the crowning of the first Mae Young Classic winner. It will be a battle royal instead of a tournament because I think it would be better off. But also, this episode was a bigger episode than I normally make, with legends up and down the card and fantastic segments and planting the seeds for the future. But also, it was a way to dedicate the show to both Killer Kowalski and Mae Young. With that being said, though, Let me know down in the comment section below if you're enjoying this series. And also, stay tuned for the update of the first series, the first episode of the Memphis series as we go back to where wrestling was real down in Memphis, Tennessee, and try and heat back up the stagnated territory led by Jerry Lawler, Tommy Rich, Austin Idol, and superstar Bill Dundee as we move wrestling in Memphis into the next generation. So stay tuned for that, and also stay tuned for more from the ruthless aggression era here in TEW. If you're enjoying this content, feel free to interact with the video either by leaving a like, subscribing to the channel, or leaving a comment, or doing all three, because any and all interactions with these videos are very much appreciated and do help us get noticed by the algorithm so more people can watch this content. But if you want to know, if you want to be selfish and keep it for yourself, then you gotta hit that subscription box. I mean, you gotta ding dong that bell next to the subscription box to always know when a new video is up on the channel, because that is the only way YouTube will send you a notification if you ding dong that bell next to the subscription box. And with that being said, I'm done here, and so are you, and I will see you in the next one.